Gonna colonial building grounds.
Okay, so we're here.
Yeah.
The entrance is over here in the back.
Okay.
In this room here?
Do you mind if I record it?
Of course I don't mind. You
Okay.
can record
Okay.
whatever you want.
Good. Okay, good.
Yeah, so you'll just follow me here.
Okay.
We have this nice timeline of events in Newfoundland history to explain colonial development. So, story of this place really starts in 1832. In 1832, Newfoundland is granted what's known as representative government. So prior to 1832, Newfoundland would have just been run as a colony with an appointed governor who could do whatever he wants. In 1832, though, Newfoundland is granted what's called representative government. Essentially, in that system, there is an elected House of Assembly and an appointed upper chamber called the Legislative Council, but there is no premier, and the powers of the legislature is only advisory. So the governor in practice could still do what they wanted. When they were first meeting after the first Newfoundland elections in 1832, they realized they didn't have anywhere to meet. So they first started meeting in a tavern, which was a temporary kind of fix to the problem. Unfortunately, Mary Travers, the owner, had not been paid by them for them using it as a parliament. And so she proceeded to evict the legislature and confiscate some of their items, like the speaker's chair, the mace, and essentially hold those for ransom until the government agreed to pay her, which they eventually did. Between 1833 between 1833 and 1850, they bounced around between a few locations, but they really wanted a place that was religiously neutral, had a nice location overlooking St. John's, would be separated from any kind of fire, and would be near the government house, so the governor's house just next door.
Oh, okay.
In 1836, they passed an act to start building building, but it's not till 1847 that they start constructing this place.
Right.
Construction takes till 1850, and in 1850 the first session here takes place.
Okay.
So when they were constructing this place, they ran into a few major issues though. One is the fact that, just importing stone to make the outside was very expensive. The other thing was that the ground at Bannerman Park is marshland, i.e. not ideal for building, anything on.
Yeah.
And the people making it knew that, so they had to do some kind of ingenious building designs. So you'll notice the walls, like for here and here, the walls on these doors here are pretty thick. That's intentional. We're just beneath some of the chambers, like the large chambers where the House of Assembly would have been. So in order to stop the building from sinking, they make the walls thicker. Underneath the building, they add stone supports, and they also add drains to allow the water to kind of drain out of the building. So the colonial building from 1850 onwards kind of represents all of the major stages of Newfoundland governance. So from 1850 to 55, it's still representative government. In 1855, Newfoundland's granted responsible government. So that's kind of like Canada. It's a modern democratic system where there is an elected House of Assembly. The leader of the largest party of that assembly becomes the premier. And Newfoundland continues on with that for decades. So in 1907, Newfoundland is granted what's known as Dominion status, and so the Newfoundland premiers upgrade to Newfoundland Prime Minister, and Newfoundland becomes its own country like Canada or Australia. And we continue on that system until 1933. So in the early 20th century, Newfoundland had steadily been taking on more and more debt to fund different things. Two major kind of, spending areas was the railway and World War I. So by the time you get to the late 20s, Newfoundland is in a tremendous amount of debt, about $100 million of debt. And that's bad before the Depression. When the Depression starts in 1929, it turns Newfoundland's economy basically catatonic. And this isn't helped, by the fact that the government of the time is pretty corrupt. So the current government of Newfoundland in the Depression is Sir Richard Squire's Liberal Party government. And he had been accused of, among other things, stealing tax dollars, stealing veterans' pensions, and tax evasion, and stealing government money, And this, is combined, as I said, with basically a catatonic economy where there's, keep in mind, no money, so no, public works programs, no, government assistance to help people. The only real welfare is the dole, and that's 6 cents a day, so $22 a year. So it just creates this kind of perfect storm of chaos. And it all culminates on April 5th, 1932. So on the 5th of April, 1932, some women who are carrying a petition to the House of Assembly, they start a march there. They say, we're bringing this petition forward, asking for the government to press charges against Sir Richard Squires for corruption. This escalates, though, because by this point, everyone hated Squires. So this escalates into a march of 10,000 people who come up to the Colonial Building, and they surround the entire place. And they demand that Squires come out and face them. Squires, because keep in mind, Parliament's in session when all this is happening. So Squires is in the House of Assembly. And he does not come out to face them. Some of the more agitated members of the crowd start to riot, so they start smashing all of the windows, they start trying to break in, and they really want to get to Squires. And I don't really have much doubt if they had gotten to Squires, would have been, was it the storming of the Bastille? It should have been like that. So Squires is eventually able to escape under police escort by going out the front door, but his government is effectively ended by the riot. And he's forced to call a new election, which he loses to the United Newfoundland Party, basically the Conservative Party, under Frederick Allardyce. And Allardyce promises that he has a solution to whatever's going on right now, He says, we're going to bring in an outside kind of commission to do an investigation on whatever is... So, you don't need to be a genius to look at that and be like, yeah, that's not right.
Yeah.
So it's made up of 3 British people, 3 Canadians, and the commission returns a report called the Murray Report, which essentially which is not charitable in Newfoundland, it essentially comes to the conclusion Newfoundland is not ready for responsible government. It's not fit for independence or democracy. It instead recommends that Newfoundland go to what's called Commission of Government. This is where the governor will now be in charge, and there will be a 6-member appointed council, 3 Newfoundlanders, 3 British people, that will run Newfoundland temporarily, And so the Newfoundland Parliament in December 1933 votes itself out of existence. So democracy is effectively suspended. And the commission rules, again, I mentioned the whole idea of being temporary. It rules 15 years, from 1933 to when Newfoundland joins Canada in 1949. Now, speaking of the whole Canada debate, by 46, this is after World War II, people are pretty sick of the commission. The commission, as I said, is appointed, so it's completely unaccountable. It hadn't really done much to deal with the Depression. And people were really getting sick of them. So by 1946, the British government says, fine, you'll have a national convention where Newfoundlanders will elect representatives from all across the island, and they will come to the House of Assembly to debate the future of Newfoundland. At this convention, there are technically four factions that emerge. The first major faction is the Confederates, or pro-Confederation people, led by Joey Smallwood. They're the ones saying we should join Canada. The second faction is called the Responsible Government League, led by a man named Peter Cashin. They advocate, returning to responsible government, becoming independent, and forming a closer relationship with the UK. The third faction are the Commission of Government people saying, don't rock the boat and stuff like that. There's technically a fourth faction. They're kind of a part of the Responsible Government League, led by John Crosby's father, Chesley Crosby. They're called the Economic Union Party. So they also advocate for return to responsible government, but instead of forming a closer relationship with Canada or Britain, they say we need to form an economics and customs union with the United States. While a novel idea at the time, it didn't really take off, and so in 1948, 3 options were presented to Newfoundlanders in a referendum. You can join Canada, you can return to responsible government, or you can stay with Commission. Responsible government actually wins the first referendum, but they don't win 50%, therefore the British say no majority. They bump off Commission of Government as it's like the 3rd place, and clearly nobody wants it.
Yeah.
And they approve a second referendum between just responsible government and confederation. Smallwood, thanks to pretty hard-fought campaign, wins 51-49, so he wins only by 2 points. So it was an incredibly contentious kind of referendum.
Sounds like the Quebec referendum.
Yeah, it was incredibly contentious.
Yeah.
Actually, funny thing is, this wasn't the first time Newfoundland debated Confederation. Newfoundland debated Confederation in 1869, so just 2 years after Confederation Canada was created, Newfoundland was debating joining it. So like a lot of other Atlantic colonies, Newfoundland sent representatives to the various conferences that eventually formed Canada, but they were pretty on the fence about it. They didn't commit. They weren't like, let's do this. They're like, This comes to a head in 1869, where the 1869 Newfoundland general election becomes all about Confederation. And the 2 main factions are the anti-Confederates, led by the Liberal Party under Robert Fox Bennett, and the pro-Confederates, who are mostly conservative. So you have to remember, by this point, Canada's pretty new. It's only 2 years old by the time this election takes place. So it's pretty uncertain what it's going to look like. And there's a lot of fears. There's 3 main fears, really, of Confederation in Newfoundland. One, people fear Newfoundlanders will be conscripted to fight in Canadian wars. It wasn't, only a few decades later, after this election, Newfoundland would fight in the Boer War in South Africa. They would send forces there. The second fear comes mainly from Irish Catholics, lower class Irish Catholics. They fear, this new confederation is mostly Protestant outside of Quebec. So they fear that the federal government will, if Newfoundland joins Canada, the federal government will favor the rights of the Protestant church in Newfoundland while undermining the rights of the Catholic church. And at a time when religion is very central to Newfoundland, that's a big no-no. The third kind of thing is mainly a worry of the upper class. So upper class Protestant merchants are worried about Canadian taxation. They're making quite a profit off the whole truck system and stuff like that. And they don't want that threatened, not only by potential outside competition from joining Canada and the reduction in trade barriers, but also of Canadian taxes. And so Bennett and the anti-Confederates are able to weaponize that pretty effectively. They accuse the pro-Confederates of wanting to sell Newfoundland out, and that Confederation will result in Newfoundland being sold up the river, essentially. And they sweep that election. The anti-Confederates win it. And Confederation is effectively made kind of a fringe, what's the phrase they use, third rail idea until the late 40s. So under the responsible government era, if you wanted to smear your opponent, you would say that they're Confederate. You would say that they want to sell out Newfoundland to Canada. And there were some politicians in Newfoundland who were secretly pro-Confederation, but they would never say that publicly, because it's considered ballot box poison. So just to put this in perspective, Smallwood really had to fight hard for getting that. But even after we joined Canada on March 31st, 1949, we still used this building as our parliament. So from 49 to 59, it was still being used, if you'll just follow me.
You said something about railroad. Is there a railroad big here in Newfoundland?
There was a railway.
There was.
From the late 1800s until the 1980s. It was just kind of deemed wasn't being used too often. It was very expensive. A lot of people do credit that as the reason Newfoundland gets into so much debt and eventually loses its independence and stuff like that. But long term probably wasn't the greatest investment. So we continued to use this building as the House of Assembly, as the Parliament, up until 1959. So by the late 50s, they kind of determined that this place was way too small. It's built for a government in 1850, not a government in 1950, where you have a growing population a growing bureaucracy, growing seats and stuff like that.
Right.
So they decided to just build a new building, the Confederation Building, which is where the modern House of Assembly meets. And that can be expanded on if necessary. So the last working session was held here on July 28th, 1959. But even after we closed this place, it was still being used as the, if you'll just excuse me, that's good one. Even after the Parliament stopped meeting here in 1959, it was still used as the host of the Newfoundland Library and Archives until the rooms was constructed in 2005. In 2009, this place had been a historic site since 1974, but in 2009, we began restoring it, and by 2022, after a 12-year restoration process and $24 million being spent, here it is now, open to the public.
So this was the assembly area right here?
No, this is one of two chambers.
Oh,
So
the
this
chamber.
Here. As I mentioned, responsible government included the lower house, the House of Assembly, elected, picks the prime minister or premier.
Okay.
But there's also an upper house. So this is the legislative council, the upper house of the Newfoundland government, effectively acting like the British House of Lords or the Canadian Senate. So its members are appointed, and they would act as a check on the powers of the House of Assembly. Unfortunately, we had to remove a lot of the furniture, but you can see photos of what it would look like.
Yeah.
The Legislative Council did not carry over to responsible to Confederation, so today we just have the House of Assembly. There is no upper house. You'll notice the red carpeting, again, that's a mirror of the British House of Lords. You'll also notice this nice chandelier here. Please do not touch it. It's one of a kind. This was part of the building when it was constructed in 1850. So back when they constructed this place in 1850, there's no electricity, no insulation, no heating. So this would be lit by gas lamp, which is why it's so close to the ground. Because obviously, if you had it all the way up there, you want to hold a meeting and you need to light the lamps, well then you gotta climb up and do all that stuff, and it's just, it'd be a big hassle. Okay? So, they made it closer to the ground. You also notice in pretty much every room of this place, a fireplace. The reason they had this here is because, as I said, there was no insulation and no heating. So a room like this, a big room, could get quite cold in the winter. So they would have fireplaces to allow things to be warm. Probably coal-fired fireplaces. I would also like to draw your attention to this big portrait. I'm sure you noticed it when you walked in here.
Yeah.
This is the portrait of Sir Charles Henry Darling. So he was governor of Newfoundland during when Newfoundland was granted responsible government in 1855. So the British governors of Newfoundland, free responsible government, pretty much could do whatever. Appointed by Britain, do whatever, Post responsible government, at least in theory, they're supposed to be politically neutral and mostly a figurehead. In practice, the governors would at times intervene in politics, when they're not supposed to. You also notice these holes here. People ask what these are. These are the reveals. So, when they were restoring this place, they started peeling back all the layers of paint from over the years, and they found some of the original layers of paint from the late 1900s. So we have them all throughout the building. You'll notice them as you walk around. And these are meant to show what it would have originally looked like. You can also see some interesting design features. So you can see right here, this looks like it's made out of a nice marble. It fits the kind of neoclassical Greek or Roman design they're trying to do. This is wood.
Wood.
Yeah, that looks like fine wood. Right here, you'll see this area, this part here. This looks like a nice fine wood, it's just regular wood. That looks like marble. It's wood. So, in the 19th century, it was quite common that people couldn't afford, they want to go for that Greek or Roman look, but it's pretty expensive to get Greek or Roman marble, especially in Newfoundland. So what they would do, they would just kind of take whatever material they had available, and they put on a nice finish to make it look Greek or Roman without actually having to pay.
That's pretty creative.
Yeah, it's very creative. You have to think that marble, even today I feel like marble would run you a lot of money. Getting marble across the Atlantic, through the Mediterranean, across the Atlantic Ocean.
Sure.
Here. This building was already, this building already costed, at the time of its construction, 18,000 pounds. So it wasn't really, you can see what the place will look like when it's fully with furniture and stuff like that.
Yes.
Here you can see a picture of the last members of the Legislative Council in 1933. So these were the last members of the Upper House of Newfoundland. All would have been appointed and stuff like that. The only one I can recognize in this photo is this man here. I believe this is Walter Stanley Monroe. So he was Prime Minister of Newfoundland from 1924 to 1928. So he, I guess, as a man of high standing, he got appointed to the Legislative Council. Go follow me for the field. Thank you. These rooms here are pretty much empty. We don't really have anything like that. Through here, we're now into the grand entrance of the House of Assembly, or the Colonial House. So people back in the day would come through these doors here.
That's the main door.
Yeah, this would have been the front door. It would have gone through here. And, you know, it's very neoclassical, very Titanic-esque.
Yeah, that's right. It looks like.
Very beautiful.
Yeah,
Now,
sure.
you'll notice up on the ceiling, you'll notice this kind of big glass thing that allows light to shine down. That's called the lantern. So I mentioned this place didn't have electricity. This place didn't have electricity when it was first built. It didn't get electricity until the 1890s. So from the 1850 to the 1890s, this building had the lantern, which essentially allowed light to shine down to this area and light it up. In the 1890s, after this building got electric lighting, it was determined that the lantern was leaking water into this room, so they removed it and replaced it with just a regular glass window. It was not until the restoration from 2009 to 2022 that was added back in. We added it back in because, one, I think it looks really cool, honestly. It's a great attraction. You'll also notice the niche up there. So people ask us what was originally in it, and we, for the life of us, can't figure it out. We have done extensive archival research. There's no photos or descriptions of what was originally in it. The closest idea we have as to what was in it was that it could be like a statue of Queen Victoria. It could be a flag niche for the different flags. It could be for a portrait or something like that. We have no idea, so we like to leave it open to interpretation rather than just putting something there.
So originally,
That are empty.
Those would have been offices.
They were offices.
So most of the rooms around here would have been offices. I'll show you a few of them obviously later and point out some of their significance. But yeah, most of them would have been offices.
you said that up at the ceiling. Was that a light? Like that was natural glass that would allow light in?
Yeah, so essentially it's called lantern. So light would shine through the glass and down into this space here.
Yeah.
Because back then, imagine trying to light this entire big roof of gas lamps.
Sure.
Be quite expensive. So he instead decided to build a lantern to try and save it, probably on cost, but also it's more effective perhaps at lighting this area.
Yeah. Well, you have one in your house. What do you call that? They're not
Skylights.
Skylights.
Right?
Yeah,
I
skylight.
think it was called the lantern. I don't think they would have used
Yeah.
the skylight. If you're following me now, I'll take you into the House of Assembly itself.
Okay.
House of Assembly. So this is where the Parliament of the Newfoundland government would meet.
Oh, okay.
Representative responsible for commission to Confederation. You also notice on the tables, we have the Terms of Union that Joyce Smallwood signed on March 31st, 1949. So these were the terms that Newfoundland had when it joined Canada. Newfoundland system, you have the different seats, you have the seat of the speaker. At that table there, the parliamentary clerk, kind of record keeper, and the sergeant at arms would sit there. The government would sit on this side of the house, and the opposition would sit over there, which is different from traditionally. Usually it's the other way around. The reason in the Newfoundland system we do that is because when the government was first meeting here in 1850, the government side got here first and decided that they wanted to sit next to the fireplace. So the opposition would sit over there. These desks are original, and the place is set up to mirror what it would have looked like after the 1882 general election. So in the 1882 general election, there would be 26 government members, 5 opposition members, and 2 independents. So it would have been a lot smaller than it is today. I believe today the House of Assembly has somewhere in the low 40s number of seats. You'll also notice 2 boxes in the back. So the one on the left is the petitioner's box. So back in the day, you could bring petitions to Parliament, which you can't do today in the Newfoundland system. So if you wanted to bring a petition to the House, to the Confederation building today, you'd have to go through your local MHA, member of the House of Assembly, and they would present it. But back then, you could just kind of present it yourself. It was actually, as I mentioned during the riot was caused by an initial march of petitioners. So, yeah, they actually presented that petition at the height of the protest. On the right, you have the press box. So this is where journalists live then. At the top, you might have noticed it in the Legislative Council. You can see a gallery over there. That's the Strangers Gallery. So that's where the public could come to watch sessions of the House of Assembly. Though, I would kind of make the point though that if the Legislative Council or House of Assembly didn't want the public to hear what they were talking about, they'd go to their respective kind of speaker and they would say, Mr. Speaker, there are strangers in the gallery. And the Sergeant at Arms would go up there and lead them out, close the doors, so they can conduct their business privately. You also notice these boxes here. These are actually camera boxes. So in the late 40s and early 50s, when TV is becoming more common, they would set these up, and these would essentially be used for cameras. So like today, they would record and broadcast these kind of sessions of the House of Assembly. You also notice this staircase. This is the legendary Squire's Staircase. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
So originally this would have just been a staircase for parliamentary pages. Yes, you can point the camera down there. It wasn't too special, but it gained legendary status in Newfoundland when, and according to legend during the riot, Sir Richard Squires, Prime Minister, to escape the mob, fled down those stairs. In some accounts of the story, he's dressed as a woman, and he flees down the stairs out the back door to escape. In reality, as I said, he went out the front door with a police escort to get across the road to get to a taxi cab and escape. It took the police an hour to get him across the road, and so he was able to eventually escape, without dying. But after he was booted out as Prime Minister, he never apologized for his corruption. He said, I have nothing to apologize for. And he had a vacation house in Jamaica. When Newfoundland democracy ended with the Commission of Government, where was he? He was in Jamaica. He got away with it.
Did they not have courts or rules of law that they could have?
He could have been, I believe so just to keep in mind, he served non-consecutively. So from 1919 to 24, he was Prime Minister. He gets booted out by Walter Stanley Monroe and the Conservatives.
Yeah.
And after he's booted out as Prime Minister, he does get arrested on tax evasion.
Oh, he does.
But he then comes back in 28 and wins the Prime Ministership again.
Always in power.
Sounds like Trump.
familiar.
Trump. It sounds familiar.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it sounds familiar. Yeah, but I guess that this is kind of the question because the accusations were never proven.
Okay.
No, but there's enough. No, it's like one of those things where it's like, what is it? O.J. Simpson. It's like it's never proven.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of
Right.
circumstantial evidence.
Yeah.
There's enough evidence that you can sit there and be like.
Yeah. These things almost look like old school desks.
They kind of do, yeah.
Wooden
So,
desks.
yeah, these ones just been the regular desks the members of the House of Assembly would sit at. I believe the Prime Minister, actually, word of clarification. Sometimes we use the term Premier or Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So between 1850 and 1907, before Newfoundland's a Dominion, but still as responsible government, they would be called the Premier. From 1907 to 33, they'd be called the Prime Minister, because Newfoundland's a Dominion. And from 1949 onwards, they're called the Premier again, because Newfoundland's a province. Now, before we move on, I want to show you the press rooms and the other rooms of this building. So this is where journalists live, and you can see a picture on the wall there. This is where they would have come in through, but it's also where they would have come out of to type up their press reports for, for the newspapers and stuff like that. Here you can see this interesting kind of political comic. This is from 1832. So this is before the first Newfoundland election has even occurred, but it's a British newspaper commenting on Newfoundlanders getting representative government. And the whole point of this whole cartoon is that they're saying that, the second Newfoundlanders get representation, it's all going to go to the dogs. Which I think reflects a very elitist sort of character, of the British to view Newfoundland. And you see that echoed with commission of government, the idea that Newfoundlanders are not ready.
Or the
I would emphasize that ready in air quotes. What does that mean?
To their credit, though, it looks like the Newfoundland type dog.
Yeah, it's the Newfoundland dog, which I think is kind of funny. That
Yeah, it is
They
funny.
knew enough about that to be like,
That's pretty cool.
Reminds me of the old famous painting of dogs playing poker, right?
yes.
Yeah, they can do it too. That's neat. Yeah.
Through here, we're actually in the office of the Newfoundland Savings Bank. So when this place was open, the Newfoundland government operated a bank here.
A bank.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Newfoundland, late 19th century, it's a modernizing economy, it's a developing economy.
Yeah.
Banking is an inevitable part of industrial economies.
Wow.
So there was a bank here. There was also a bank vault in the basement, which played host to the first bank robbery in Newfoundland history. I'll
Really?
tell you about that a bit later. But yeah, you can see we have costumes here for people to dress up in. But it would have operated as any kind of standard bank. You'd come in and you'd do something. You write a check or you deposit stuff. Yeah.
That's neat.
Yeah. I can now take you upstairs as well. You'll notice these.
When did the women get the right to vote?
1925. So,
1925.
like a lot of suffragette movements in Canada and the United States and Britain, the Newfoundland suffragette movement gets its start in the late 19th century and kind of expands and grows from there, particularly during the First World War. Yeah.
1925, eh?
Yeah.
And how about, do you know when the women got the right to vote in the U.S.?
1919, I believe.
Oh, a
or
little bit
1918.
before. Okay.
1918,
Yeah.
I believe, with one of the constitutional amendments.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because I know the first election that women could vote in the United States, at least like in all 50 states, not counting states that did legalize, give women the right to vote independently.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like in Canada, some provinces would also give women the right to vote before Canada federally gave them the right to vote.
Yeah.
Here you can see the staircases here. These are the original staircases. So the one we came up from would not have been there back in the day. So this would have been how, if you wanted to get up into the Colonial building from the basement, this is how you would have gotten up. We don't use these anymore. They're pretty out of code, pretty small. And they're also quite old. We don't want,
Wooden,
we don't want someone going through them. Or them getting damaged. I'll now lead you upstairs, so we'll get to see the upper floor of the Colonial building. So up here, we got a bunch of rooms up here. I'll take you up into the rooms over here. So these were originally been offices. They've been kind of restyled into essentially kind of sites to demonstrate Newfoundland history. So you were asking me about women getting the right to vote. So, as I mentioned, the women's suffrage movement in Newfoundland. Oh, just a moment, I gotta breathe. The women's suffrage movement in Newfoundland gets its start in the late 19th century and expands from there. By the 1920s, they've really reached they've reached their pinnacle, and they're putting a lot of pressure on the government to be like, hey, we want the right to vote. But the government in the early 20s, Mr. Squires' government, remember him? Him and the Liberal Party, they don't say yes, but they're not saying no either. They essentially kind of just delay it. So like, the women's suffrage people would come to Sir Richard Squires, Prime Minister, and say, Mr. Prime Minister, we would like you to table a bill to allow women's suffrage. Then he'd go and he'd say, probably, I'd like to imagine he would say, I'll think about it. Go into the House of Assembly. We will table this until next year. And just repeating that over and over again.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason why he's doing that is essentially the Liberal Party and Squires kind of thinks, female voters at the time are more favorable to my opponent, the Conservatives under Walter Stanley Monroe. Monroe is sympathetic to the suffragettes. And so Squires is thinking, if I grant women's suffrage, that just gives a ton of votes to the Conservatives, and it will effectively cost me re-election.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't help him. He ends up losing the next election. And Walter Stanley Monroe comes in And as I said, he's sympathetic to the suffragette movement. You know, he's kind of like, yeah, I'll allow it. So he puts forward a bill in 1925 to allow women's suffrage, and it passes unanimously. And women get the right to vote in Newfoundland under responsible government. Well, obviously they have the right to vote to the president, of course, you know. But it's kind of unfortunate that like just 8 years after that, you know, responsible government ends for like 15 years. Yeah, unfortunate. So there's only a few elections where they can really exercise that right for a while.
It ended after a certain while? Why did it end?
Well, Commission of Government ends all elections. In
Oh.
that period.
Oh, I
And
see.
Parliamentary elections. So
Oh, I get
not
it.
only can women not vote under Commission of Government, no one can vote.
Oh, well, it's still equal then.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah.
Equality in no democracy for you.
Yeah,
This
yeah, right.
here, this is a picture from the first Newfoundland Teachers Convention in 1898. I always say this would have been super hard. Imagine organizing this. In 1898, a lot of Newfoundland communities, very disconnected.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
literally, like, isolated from any roads. There's no highways. The best you got is the railway. But
Yeah.
yeah, you'd have to bring people from the most isolated
Yeah.
settlements in Newfoundland, outports and stuff like that, and bring them all to St. John's, presumably on their own funds, on their own dime, just so they can meet here.
Were they mostly women and
Yeah,
teachers?
well,
Looked like at least half.
About half. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty impressive. Yeah.
Well, for the time, I suppose. But progressive. You also notice this cartoon here. So I feel like I always like to bring attention to this. While the cartoon is mainly focused on the franchise, you also see this here, which I think points to the fact that the suffragette movement is not just about the right to vote. That's the central thing. But there's a bunch of other things around it. Like, it's kind of tied into early 20th century kind of progressivism, which is mainly focused on, you know, equal justice, but also stuff like public health campaigns, education, also prohibition.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Newfoundland did introduce prohibition from 1917 to 24.
Yeah.
A lot of women's groups were quite pro-prohibition. You know, in the States, they have the famous the Women's Christian Temperance.
Oh, yeah,
Group.
yeah.
And they even had a prohibition party as well.
Yeah. The temperance movement and all that. And, like, and there goes your port drinking anymore.
Yeah. So here it talks about two different things. One is the Chinese head tax. So in Newfoundland, much like in Canada and the United States, Newfoundland government was not big on Chinese immigration. What little Chinese immigration there was to Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
So they implemented this very racist policy called the head tax. Similar things have been done in Canada. Essentially, if you are a Chinese immigrant and you're not a part of some kind of like diplomatic corps, or you're a part of the Chinese government, you have to pay $300 to come to Newfoundland. Which,
Wow.
think about that, $300 in 1906, insane amount of money.
Yeah.
And that's the point. It's effectively prohibiting almost any Chinese person, unless they're very wealthy, from coming to Newfoundland. This remained in effect until Newfoundland joined Canada in 1949, where the head tax was kind of dissolved by the 1947 Canadian Citizenship Act. Here, you can also see some telegrams from the kind of territorial dispute between mainly Newfoundland and Quebec, but since Quebec doesn't have, obviously as a province of Canada, Quebec did not have diplomatic powers, so it's effectively a dispute between the Canadian government and Newfoundland. So Newfoundland had, since its early origins as a colony, had claimed Labrador, but its actual ability to enforce that claim was pretty limited, even into the 20th century. So in 1927, I believe the Quebec government, who was Quebec premier at the time? I'll actually pull that up. I want to see who the Quebec premier at the time was, because I want to actually be correct out of that. Hold on. So, Louis Andre Tachot or something like that, he is premier of Quebec, and he says, you know, in 1927, the Quebec government under him says, actually, Newfoundland does not own all of Labrador. They only have the coast, the main area of settlement. We actually own the inner part of Labrador, which is part of Quebec, and they dispute Newfoundland territorial claim. Since the Quebec government, as I said, doesn't have diplomatic powers, the Canadian government acts on their behalf. And this is where the British get involved. The British say, you know, we don't want a dispute between two dominions over basically a land that very few people are settling and stuff like that. So they say, we'll go to the Privy Council, which is the highest court in the British Empire, and they will decide the territory. So essentially international arbitration.
Yeah.
The Privy Council unanimously decides that Newfoundland's claim is valid and that Quebec's claim is not. And so Newfoundland gets modern Labrador today.
Oh.
And I believe among some Quebec nationalists, it's still a bit of a sore spot. I believe the Bloc Québécois and other separatist parties, when they present an act of Quebec, they will include Labrador. You know, I guess it's part of like a small.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
Here you can see actually a picture of a march that led up to the Colonial House riot. So I always say that this march was kind of a unifying event for Newfoundland society, despite how dark the events of that day was. You know, this brought together a society that was very divided on religion between Catholics and Protestants, divided on class between upper and lower classes, divided on gender, men and women. But their hatred of squires brought them all together. Because this march included Catholics, Protestants, merchants, lower class people, women, men, children, World War I veterans, the whole marching band. They were all brought together by being sick of the government, essentially. I don't know how they organized this. I assume it would have spread by word of mouth and stuff like that.
You didn't have Twitter then, yeah.
Yeah, could you imagine? Imagine if you did this, well actually, you probably could organize something like this today, depending on your social media reach. But it's the whole fact that they have a full-on band.
Yeah. Now, did you say it was a dark day? Like, did people die?
No, I mean in the sense in the sense that it's a sign of the end of Newfoundland's government.
Oh, I see. Because then they canceled everything, the voting rights.
No one, not to my knowledge, no one died.
Yeah.
People were injured, but no one died.
Right.
Yeah. Here you can see a picture of Sir Richard Squires and his wife Helena Squires. Helena Squires is quite noteworthy because she was the first and only female MHA under responsible government. Obviously, we've had female MHAs under Confederation. We've had a female premier under Confederation. But she was elected as the MHA for Louisbourg in 1930, which, for the time, that's definitely quite a big milestone to have a female MHA in society where women did not
MHA,
have.
that's
Member of the House of Assembly.
Oh, I see. She was a member.
Yeah, MP. At the time, it was viewed with a bit of suspicion. Like, members of Squires' Liberal Party kind of thought, like, Squires just getting his wife involved because he wants to save the
Right.
vote. And obviously, the opposition Conservatives took digs at her because, a lot of people saw this as, I think a lot of people saw this as a bit nepotistic.
Yeah.
Squires is already being accused of corruption. It doesn't then help to be like, I'm getting a close family member elected.
But he was Sir. Like, the Queen knighted him?
Yeah. Well, like
What?
all the prime minister, think about prime ministers, they do get the title of Sir. I think when they refer to all of them, they just say Sir. I'm not sure if they would be knighted.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, that was
a.
Oh, you're right. It's probably just a term.
That door there would take you up into the attic. We unfortunately do not allow people up there because it's quite old, and also there's no air conditioning. I don't know if you've ever been in an attic of a building that has an old building that has no air conditioning. It's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is really not up to code. The only thing really noteworthy up there is the mail room.
Yeah.
Is there anything else up there in the attic inside the room?
Not particularly. It's really just like the rafters.
Yeah.
Up above the two chambers.
Okay. Bats in the belfry? No? Were there bats up there?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
If you follow me through here, we're now in the Stranger's House.
Oh, okay.
So if you were a member of the public in the responsible government area, let's say, you say, I'm going to take a quick, kind of log down to the Colonial building and go watch a session. You can watch it from up here. Assuming the, legislature didn't say, like, we don't want you to watch this. You can see the camera boxes I mentioned earlier for broadcasting. You'll also notice on the ceilings these beautiful paintings, also the Legislative Council. These were completed until the 1880s. It was done by a man you can read about here. His name was Alexander Pandowski. Pendowski was a Polish man, you know, and importantly a fresco painter, rare skill at the time. He had come to Newfoundland to teach fresco painting at the Heart's Content cable station. And you know, like his clientele, mostly wealthy Newfoundlanders, because like,
Sure.
you know, your average bayman is not going to be learning fresco painting. So he gets arrested though in St. John's on charges that he's forged checks. And so he gets sent to 15 months in prison, presumably I would imagine Her Majesty's Penitentiary. Now, he's not happy about that, because it's prison in the 1800s, so pretty ghastly if we're being honest. And he makes a deal with the Newfoundland government saying, hey, I have this specialized skill, the Newfoundland government knows it, will you take time off my sentence if I paint the ceilings? The Newfoundland government, actually I phrased that pretty poorly. The Newfoundland government came to him and said, we know your skills, can you do this? We'll take time off your sentence. So he'd be let out for a day, and he would come here and he would set up scaffolding and paint the ceilings here. For all of his efforts, he got 1 month off the sentence. Yeah, so instead of 15 months, he gets 14 months. So he's still spending a year in prison. Yeah.
I guess it's not the Sistine Chapel.
Bargained a little better on that.
Yeah, I think.
I said the Newfoundland government's probably coming to him, so
Yeah, that's
I feel
true.
like for him, would you risk? Because the risk is if you ask for too much, they might just say no,
Yeah,
and actually the
Yeah.
original deal's off, and you're not going to be stuck here.
that's true.
Yeah.
I suppose.
So,
You don't have too many cards to play. I
no,
guess.
no. What's the phrase we come? You don't have the cards.
Yes.
Yeah, that's all right.
Now, like, you also notice up in these corners here, there's a woman's face in that. That was actually done by Pendowski intentionally. So he had fallen in love with some of the cleaning staff who worked here. He had fallen in love with one of the women here who worked as a maid. And he decided, as a symbol for his love for her, to paint her face into the roof of the Colonial building
Wow.
of this ceiling here. He eventually got married to her, had a kid with her. After he was released, he moved to Boston with his wife and child.
Oh,
You know, I wouldn't have stayed in Newfoundland if I was forced to spend like 18
time there.
If a country locks you up for 15 months, you probably don't want to stay there.
Yeah.
You also notice here, we're in the gallery of the Legislative Council. You'll also notice this. This is kind of the Colonial building done up for the coronation of King Edward VII. So, like a lot of dominions at the time in the early 20th century, Newfoundland derived a lot of its patriotic pride from the idea of it being a part of the British Empire and its connection to the British Crown. You can really see, you'll really notice it if you look at a lot of British recruitment posters for the Commonwealth from World War I. You know, a lot of like, you know, what's the famous one for Kitchener? Your country needs you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would have loved to see this in real life because you can see all the different shades and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it would have been in color. It would have been beautiful.
Yeah. We saw somewhere where we were driving north here that, what is it, that regiment that was famous?
The Royal Newfoundland Regiment.
Yeah, it was some famous regiment.
Yeah. The Newfoundland Regiment was Newfoundland's fighting force in World War I. So Newfoundland,
Yeah.
like Canada, was drawn into World War I.
Yeah.
We sent the Newfoundland Regiment. Newfoundland Regiment fought very hard, suffered very horrible casualties.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, at the end of the war, it was one of two regiments granted the prestigious title of Royal by the King of Britain.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it's a big point of pride for Newfoundland.
Yes, yes.
You know? Through here, we're now into the Legislative Library and Newfoundland Archives today. So, as I mentioned, this place was the host of Newfoundland Archives, and the Legislative Librarian would be here. Usually the librarian was a woman, either two most famous are Mrs. Mary Ella Morris and Mrs. Sarah Pritchard. They actually lived here. So there were some people who lived in this building in the basement.
Wow.
So there were some apartments in the basement, one for the legislative librarian, but also for the cleaning staff. So you remember the coat room that you saw?
Yeah.
That would be actually the apartment of the kind of caretaker staff and stuff like that. Mrs. Morris was very important. You know, prior to 1930, she would perhaps be the highest woman in Newfoundland government. You know, at a time when Newfoundland women did not have a lot of powerful roles, at least formally. You know, obviously, there's informal influence, but that's not as well recorded. You know,
Yeah.
so she would have been very important. She would be responsible for keeping the archives of the Newfoundland government intact, of getting any kind of information. She had to live here because she needs to be on call 24/7. Let's say I don't know, some MHAs are preparing a bill about something in some area, and they need information on like their riding.
Mm-hmm.
Then she would come here and she would be, or like let's say the governor's trying to amend a bill they passed a while ago. They would need to check books like that, which cover kind of the acts of the Newfoundland government, so they could see like which parts need to be amended.
In our modern day parliament, they have the Hansard, where they keep all the records of everything the politician says. Did they have that then?
I would assume that would be here in the Newfoundland archives.
Yeah, I would think so. Someone would record it,
Yeah.
what they say.
Yeah, there is like a full, we have transcripts in the code room of
Oh, okay.
all the different meetings of
Okay.
the House of Assembly.
Okay, right.
Here, I like taking people up here because it gives you a good sight line to the Confederation building.
Oh, that's the new one up there. Oh, okay.
So that's where the modern Newfoundland Parliament meets.
That's the new one.
You can get tours of that place. I'm just not sure what the hours for said tours would kind of be. I guess it depends. But yeah, so they built that as the Colonial building was determined to be too small. It's got a lot of space around it, so it makes sense. You could essentially expand on it if necessary. Here you can see two interesting artifacts. One is a glass shard. This is from the kind of Colonial House riots. So as I mentioned, they were smashing all the windows. These windows had glass and storm glass behind it. They smashed all of them. So look how, just come over here, look how far down this is.
Oh, yeah, they would have thrown rocks up this high.
Rocks, wood fencing, anything.
Sounds like the Washington.
Here, you'll notice this ballot box. This was given as a gift to the MHA who put forward the Secret Ballot Act in Newfoundland. So prior to 1887, Newfoundland did not have a secret ballot. You would have to publicly declare who you voted for. And this was pretty bad because Newfoundland's pretty divided along sectarian lines.
Yeah.
And so, politics get very violent, especially based on who you voted for.
Yeah.
As an example, in some ridings and some elections, it wouldn't be like you have, I don't know, like today you go to the polls and you're like, here's the liberal candidate, here's the conservative candidate.
Yeah.
Sometimes it would just be, here's the liberal candidate, Protestant, here's the liberal candidate, Catholic. That's the only difference,
Yeah.
but that would be the determining factor.
Yeah.
You know? So they eventually introduced secret ballots. You'll notice these champagne balls and beer balls. These beer balls were mainly from workers, but the champagne balls are artifacts of the fact that this place was used for public events. So sometimes they'd open this place up to the public, and they come in and they have drinks and stuff like that. Yeah. You can see pictures here from the restoration of the place. You can see the drains I was talking about. You can see all the effort that had to go in to restoring it to what it was.
It's funny they would allow it to deteriorate like that.
Well, it's not just that it deteriorated over time. That's not even the whole thing. They had also renovated over time. So restoring this place, we restored it back to the late 19th century. So this building would have still been in the condition, would have built up over time.
Yeah.
It'd be like if you were saying, I want to restore the current White House to what it looked like whenever it was first constructed. It'd be an extensive process. Here you can see an interesting kind of thing where, as a part of the whole debate on what to do about the small size of the Colonial building, they initially proposed the idea of just tacking on a massive office block to it. This was unfeasible though. One, the whole marshland thing, I don't think the solution to it being very marshy is then to just is then to just add on more. Second, it would destroy Bannerman Park and the Government House. And people just determined that it was not practical and you could just build a new building and then just expand on it whenever you need.
Yeah.
You can see different proposed designs here for the House of Assembly in the 1830s. Very church-like, which I think the Newfoundland government wanted. The Newfoundland government wanted this building to be religiously neutral. You have to remember, Protestants and Catholics, they rely on Newfoundland. Now, if you're following me downstairs, I'd like to take you to the bank hall I was talking about earlier. Who are you recording the thing for?
We have a history club in Kitchener, and we thought we'd present it
Yeah, just a few.
for our history club. We have
Oh, that's
Together every week.
wonderful.
yeah.
Yes, of course, I have no problem with that. It's great history, so.
Yeah, it sure is.
No, I imagine it'll be a great presentation, stuff like that. Now, if you'll just follow me down here, I'll take you into the bank vault itself. So just through here with the elevator, you find the bank vault. Feel free to go in if you'd like. You are allowed to go in.
Oh,
This
okay.
is where the Newfoundland Savings Bank would put their money to. Now, shortly after this place was
Don't lock me in here.
constructed, as I mentioned,
Yeah.
there was the first bank robbery in Newfoundland history.
Yeah. Really?
So, on November 30th, 1850, shortly after this building was opened,
Yeah.
two men, James Kavanagh and Michael Whelan, broke into the place. You know, there's no security really to this place.
Yeah.
So they just kind of broke in through the back. They came in here, they picked the lock, they opened the door, and they stole 413 pounds, which in 1850, that is life-changing money.
Wow. Yeah.
The Newfoundland government puts out a £100 reward to try and find these people, but initially it doesn't seem like it's going anywhere. You know, Kavanagh and Whelan think we've pulled off the greatest heist in Newfoundland history. You know, if this was a movie, it'd be like, this is the great escape, and they live happily ever after.
Yeah.
But I mentioned the legislative librarian. She was obviously had her apartment here. She saw them, saw them coming in, and reported them to the Newfoundland government. So they get arrested. Purchard was supposed, Sarah Purchard, legislative librarian at the time,
Yeah.
was supposed to obviously get the money. Newfoundland government did not give her the money, did not give her the £100.
What?
She had to petition the governor of Newfoundland to give her the money, and she gets £75. So $25 short of the actual full amount, which is such a petty move. honestly. What? Or they just sat there like, part of your job, get back to work.
Yeah, really.
£100 back then, that's not small, that's
No.
not small change, you know?
Wow.
Yeah, of the 413 pounds, I believe they recovered half of it. So we don't know what happened to the rest of it. I assume it would have been spent. Here on the walls, you know, if you want to get a good look for your recording, these
Yeah.
are oil paintings of all the different premiers and prime ministers of Newfoundland. So on the wall here, this is the first premier of Newfoundland, Mr. P.F. Little. So these guys, up until this man here, would all be premiers. So this is Robert Bond. He was premier when Newfoundland became a dominion, and thus he gains the title of premier from 1898 to 1907, and then prime minister from 1907 to 1909.
What was his last name?
Bond, Robert Bond,
How do you spell that?
B-O-N-D.
Yeah,
Bond.
that's our name.
That's our last name.
Yeah.
And we saw the Bond Street. There's
Yeah.
a Bond Street
Yeah.
there.
Bond, very important guy. You also had his successor, Edward Morris, who was Prime Minister of Newfoundland. He led Newfoundland through the First World War. Here you have Sir Richard Squires, obviously the most infamous Prime Minister in Newfoundland history.
Oh, yeah.
You have Mr. Monroe, I pointed him out at the beginning. Prime Minister who presided over women's suffrage and Labrador boundary dispute. And then you have this gentleman here, Frederick Alderdice, the last Prime Minister of Newfoundland. He's the one who's Prime Minister when the Newfoundland kind of responsible government just says, you know, we call it quits. In fact, Newfoundland holds a dubious honor of being one of the few democratic countries that have just willingly voted itself out of existence.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be like,
That's interesting.
just to kind of think about the Commission of Government thing, it would be like if today the Canadian Parliament just voted to say, like, actually no more of this.
Mm-hmm.
We're just dissolved. We're ending ourselves willingly.
Yeah.
You know? It shows how bad the situation had gone.
Wow.
You can also see different pictures and quotes on the walls here. Like you can see a picture here of the very nice House of Assembly, the current one.
Mm-hmm.
Much wider, but I think it does try to keep the kind of, that's a similar kind of thing.
Yeah. This is the new one that's up on the hill there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
You can also see a quote here. I mentioned how divisive Confederation was earlier. I'll read this quote from Major Peter Cashin, leader of the Responsible Government League. You know, he says, "I say to you that there is in operation at the present time a conspiracy to sell," and I use the word sell advisedly, "this country to the Dominion of Canada." So, like, it is a very divisive thing.
Yeah.
You know, to the Responsible Government League people, the Confederationists are selling Newfoundland out. You know, like, you know, that's
Yeah.
their argument, and like you can see how kind of bitter and polarizing this
Yeah.
debate would become, because it's not just about like, oh, you know, what policy is going to be done for X, Y, Z. It's like, should our country continue to exist
Yeah.
or not? You know? Obviously, it's going to be divisive.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of Quebec when they had the referendum.
Yeah, like it is divisive, obviously.
Sure, it's bound to be.
This is a picture of the Colonial building just after the riot on April 5th.
Oh, wow.
You see all the windows are smashed?
Yeah.
So like I said, I always say that, you know, when people get angry,
Oh,
they
yeah.
suddenly develop very good throwing skills.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so they smash all the windows, and the storm glass is behind that.
Yeah.
So they smash all of it.
Wow.
I just want you to think about that, like, you know, it shows how angry they were, and it's honestly a
Yeah.
miracle that people didn't die during that whole event. Here you can see a nice, this is a nice map of St. John's in 1879. So the hills around St. John's today are obviously currently developed, but back then, St. John's was much smaller. St. John's Harbor looks completely different, it's just a bunch of finger piers now. Colonial buildings here. So when it was first constructed in 1850, it would have looked out over all of St. John's. Here is, I believe, the British fort where the what's it called, the rooms is,
Rooms, yeah.
and there's the cathedral, or the basilica.
And now the assembly is on this side, right? We're here somewhere?
No, no, no. it'd be
No.
back up around here,
Oh, okay.
probably. You know?
Oh, I see. It's not that far away.
The government house is just next door. That would be the house of the Newfoundland governor, and now Lieutenant Governor General of Newfoundland. And the area we're in right now is the apartment of the legislative librarian. So I mentioned the legislative librarian lived here, you know? She had to be on call 24/7, you know? So she would have lived here, and she would have, you know, like she would have, you know, for the late 19th, early 20th century, this is a nice place. Like, you got a stove for cooking, you got a multi-room apartment, you know?
Was this Sarah that had seen the bank robbers?
Sarah Purchard, but also Mrs. Ella Morris. So
Oh, okay.
by being legislative librarian, you know, it comes with the job.
I see.
Mrs. Morris, the last or at least the most famous one actually, he was a major piano player here.
Oh,
But during
okay.
the riot, you know, people are angry. And the piano, like, is would be, I imagine, would be a symbol of more upper class Newfoundlanders. You know, how many average poor Newfoundlanders can see a piano?
A piano,
So
yeah.
during the riot, they kind of start trying to figure out how to get in to the building. So they go around the back. It's like, there's these windows here. They smash through the windows. They find the piano. They drag it outside.
Really?
And set it on fire. So this just kind of goes to show the
Wow.
level of fury
Angry they were.
Yeah.
that they were at. I believe they also, I'm not sure, I believe they also stole this. So this was their personal heating stove with the coal.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
yeah,
I
they
see.
were mad. So this is their bedroom here. I want to draw your attention to this cabinet here. This looks like a regular cabinet, but it's not. It's a false cabinet.
Oh.
It's essentially a toilet.
Oh, really? That's neat.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Sort of.
yeah, yeah. A chamber pot would be there. So back in the day, you know, indoor plumbing not common
No.
at all.
Yeah.
So you'd mainly be going to like an outhouse or something
Yeah.
like that, which in the winter times, or even in the summertime, it's not comfortable.
Black flies and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it
So,
would.
so essentially, having something like this in your apartment or home, that'd be quite a luxury and stuff.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
So, yeah.
Wow, that's neat.
Here you can see some of the sheet music. This is Ella Morris, was a member of the suffragette movement.
Uh-huh.
So she
Yeah.
would sometimes play songs of the suffragette movement
Neat.
here. Yeah. Now, that pretty much brings us to the end of the tour. I hope you enjoyed it.
Oh, we did. Very
Um,
nice.
Yeah.
What's your name again?
Ryan Jefford.
Ryan Shepherd?
Jefford.
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 Okay, thank you.